Would you hand your last 17 cents to your child, knowing you might not make it through the month? Oklahoma City, March 1933. Outside Miller's Cafeteria, a mother counts coins while 3 hungry faces wait. But the camera catches something the crowd misses: her trembling hands and a decision no arithmetic can solve. Years later, a hidden letter and a photograph tucked in an old cookbook will overturn everything the family believed about that day. Stay with me. Tonight I'll unveil the whole story in a dramatized narrative inspired by real lives from the Great Depression. Before we begin, if stories from real history told through a dramatized lens matter to you, tap subscribe, like, and tell me which city you're watching from. It helps bring more forgotten lives to light and keeps this series alive. A mother stands outside Miller's Cafeteria counting coins while 3 pairs of eyes burn holes through her back. But if you look closely at this photograph, really look, you'll see something that will break your heart. Her hands are shaking, not from cold, not from hunger, but because she knows that in exactly 4 minutes, she'll have to choose which of her children eats today and which ones go to bed with empty stomachs again. And if you stay until the end, you'll discover why this moment, this terrible mathematics of survival, would save a life in the most unexpected way 70 years later. This is the story of Eleanor Hayes, a woman who counted pennies like they were drops of her own blood. The photograph was discovered in 1987, tucked inside a cookbook at an estate sale in Tulsa. The woman who found it, a retired teacher named Margaret, almost threw it away. Just another Depression-era snapshot, she thought. But then she noticed the detail that changed everything. The eldest child in the background, the girl with the hollow eyes, wasn't looking at the cafeteria window like her siblings. She was staring directly at the camera with an expression that seemed to say, "Remember us. Remember this moment. Because what we're about to do will haunt us forever." That girl was Sarah Hayes, 10 years old, and she knew something her mother didn't know yet. Something that would turn this ordinary moment of poverty into a decision that would echo through generations. Eleanor's fingers moved across the coins for the 3rd time. 17 cents. She had counted them at home, counted them on the streetcar, and now counted them again outside Miller's Cafeteria, where the smell of pot roast and fresh bread poured onto Reno Avenue like liquid torture. Behind her, Sarah pressed her face against her younger brother Thomas's shoulder. He was 8. The baby, little Margaret, only 5, whimpered something about the smell making her dizzy. But Sarah stayed silent, watching, always watching, because Sarah had overheard the conversation 2 nights before. The one Eleanor thought no one heard, the conversation with Mrs. Chen from the boarding house, where Eleanor admitted the truth she'd been hiding for 3 weeks. She hadn't eaten in 12 days. Every scrap, every crust, every spoonful went to the children. And her body was starting to fail. 17 cents. The daily special was 15 cents. 1 plate, 1 meal. 3 children. Eleanor had done the math 1,000 times, but mathematics couldn't solve this equation. The new math of the Depression had different rules. Subtract food from 1 child, divide hunger among 3, multiply guilt by infinity. Every mother on Reno Avenue knew this arithmetic. Every mother made these calculations in the dark while their children pretended to sleep. But Eleanor Hayes had a secret that made her choice even more impossible. A secret that 17 cents couldn't fix, and 3 hungry children couldn't understand. She was dying. Not from starvation, though that was accelerating it. From something the clinic doctor had whispered 3 months ago, before the bank took everything and medical care became a luxury more impossible than food. She had 6 months, maybe less, 6 months to prepare her children for a world without her. 6 months to teach them how to survive. And today, March 15th, 1933, standing outside Miller's Cafeteria with 17 cents and 3 desperate faces behind her, she had to make a choice that would either save them or destroy them. Sarah watched her mother's shoulders drop. That tiny movement, barely visible, that meant surrender was coming. But Sarah knew something else too. She knew what was in her mother's coat pocket. The thing Eleanor thought she'd hidden so carefully. The pawn ticket for her wedding ring. The last thing of value they owned, worth maybe $2. Maybe enough for a week of meals if they were careful. Or maybe enough for the medicine Eleanor needed but would never, ever buy. The door to Miller's Cafeteria opened. A businessman walked out, picking his teeth, his belly full. The warm air that escaped carried the scent of civilization, of normalcy, of a world that used to exist before October 1929 turned America into a nation of coin counters and dream collectors. Thomas made a sound. Not quite a cry, not quite a moan. The sound of a child's body betraying them. Eleanor turned around. The photograph captures this exact moment, the instant before she speaks. Her face is composed, almost serene, the way mothers learn to lie with their expressions. But her hands tell a different story. They're clenched so tight around those 17 cents that her knuckles have gone white. And in the bottom right corner of the photo, almost invisible, you can see something that the photographer didn't notice until years later when he developed the negative. A tear. Just one. Falling from Eleanor's cheek, because she had just made her decision, and it wasn't the decision anyone expected. Not the children, not the photographer, not even Eleanor herself until that very moment. She was going to give all 17 cents to Sarah, not for food, for something else entirely. Something that would seem insane to anyone watching. Something that would make her the worst mother in Oklahoma City or the bravest woman in America. But to understand why, to understand what made Eleanor Hayes choose what she chose in that moment, we need to go back, 6 months earlier, to the day everything changed, to the day Eleanor discovered that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you isn't losing everything. It's having to choose who survives when everything is lost. September 1932. The Hayes family still had a future tense. Past and present, yes, but also future. Dreams existed. Plans made sense. William Hayes came home every evening from the rail yard with his lunch pail empty and his pockets holding enough for tomorrow. Not wealth, never wealth, but enough. That beautiful, ordinary miracle word. Enough. Eleanor kept a garden behind their rented house on Klein Avenue. Tomatoes that grew despite Oklahoma's cruel sun. Green beans that Sarah helped pick every morning before school. The children wore hand-me-downs but clean ones, patched but proud. They knew hunger the way all working families knew it, as an occasional visitor, not a permanent resident. A skipped meal here and there when money ran tight. But never this. Never the kind of hunger that moves into your bones and refuses to leave. The garden is where Eleanor first felt it. That September morning, reaching for a tomato, when her vision blurred and her legs gave out. Sarah found her there, lying between the bean rows, conscious but confused. Eleanor made her daughter promise not to tell her father, made her swear it. Because William Hayes had enough weight on his shoulders without adding this. The free clinic on California Avenue saw dozens like her every day. Overworked, underfed women holding families together with willpower and prayer. Doctor. Morrison examined her in a room that smelled of disinfectant and desperation. His face told the story before his words did. The tumor had been growing for months, maybe years. Inoperable. Untreatable. Even if they had money for specialists, even if they had money for anything, the answer would be the same. 6 months. Maybe a year if she was lucky. Lucky. He actually used that word. Eleanor walked home along Reno Avenue that day, seeing the world differently. Every storefront, every streetcar, Every face became a countdown clock. She stopped outside Miller's Cafeteria, where she'd never been able to afford to eat, and watched through the window as families sat together over plates of food. Normal families. Families with futures. She pressed her hand against the glass, leaving a print that disappeared within seconds, and made herself a promise. Her children would survive, whatever it cost, whatever she had to sacrifice. They would survive this depression, this poverty, this curse of bad timing and worse luck. She would find a way. 2 weeks later, William Hayes came home different, his lunch pail full, his face empty. The rail yard had let him go. 47 men fired in one day. Last hired, first fired, they said. Sorry, they said. As if sorry paid rent. As if sorry filled stomachs. The mathematics of survival shifted overnight. William's final paycheck lasted 18 days. The savings account, the one they'd built nickel by nickel for 7 years, held $42. It seemed like enough. Enough to find another job. Enough to bridge the gap. Enough to survive until Roosevelt's promised New Deal arrived and fixed everything. $42 lasted 5 weeks. Then the landlord came, then the bank, then the choice between medicine and food, between dignity and survival, between keeping the house and keeping the children fed. They lost the house on Klein Avenue in November, moved to a boarding house on Hudson Avenue, where 6 families shared 2 bathrooms, and everyone's hunger echoed off thin walls. Sarah started waking up at 4 in the morning to wait in line at the soup kitchen on Broadway. Thomas stopped talking. Little Margaret forgot what it felt like to have a full stomach. And Eleanor started counting coins, counting days, counting the cost of every choice. William found work here and there. A day loading trucks, an afternoon shoveling coal. Enough to keep them in the boarding house. Enough to buy milk for the baby. Never enough for all of them. Never enough for Eleanor, who made sure of that. Who pretended she'd eaten. Who claimed she wasn't hungry. Who slowly, deliberately, invisibly starved herself so her children could have an extra piece of bread. Sarah noticed. Sarah always noticed. The way Eleanor's dresses hung looser. The way she gripped the banister when climbing stairs. The way she disappeared into the shared bathroom and came back with her face pale and her hands shaking. Sarah started hiding food, crusts of bread, half an apple, trying to force her mother to eat. But Eleanor always found a way to slip it back onto Sarah's plate when she wasn't looking. The real breaking point came in February. William left to look for work in Tulsa, promised he'd send money within a week, within 2 weeks, within a month. The letters came regularly, full of hope and promises and increasing desperation. The money didn't come at all. The job in Tulsa never materialized. The leads dried up. The promises turned to apologies, turned to silence. By March, Eleanor Hayes was alone with 3 children, 17 cents, and a body that was consuming itself from the inside out. The boarding house manager, Mrs. Chen, gave them until the end of the month. After that, the street. The children would go to the county home. Eleanor would go wherever women like her went, when they had nothing left to trade but dignity. This is what led her to Reno Avenue on March 15, 1933. To Miller's Cafeteria with its impossible smells and its 15-cent daily special. To the moment captured in that photograph. To the choice that seemed impossible. But here's what the photograph doesn't show. What nobody knew until 70 years later when Sarah's granddaughter found a letter hidden inside that old cookbook. The same cookbook where the photograph had been stored all those years. Eleanor Hayes wasn't just choosing which child ate that day. She was teaching them something. Something about sacrifice. Something about love. Something that would echo through generations in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Because the choice she made wasn't about food at all. It was about survival of a different kind. The kind that doesn't fill stomachs but builds character. the kind that hurts like hell, but lasts forever. And when she turned to face her children on that March afternoon, when she opened her mouth to tell them what she'd decided, she had no idea that her choice would one day save a life she'd never meet. But Sarah knew. Sarah had heard the conversation with Mrs. Chen, had seen the pawn ticket, had understood what 17 cents really meant in her mother's dying hands. And what Sarah did next would change everything. Eleanor Hayes looked at her 3 children and saw the future. Not her future, which was measured in months and pain, but their future. The one she wouldn't see, the one she had to build with 17 cents and the last shreds of a mother's will. Sarah's eyes met hers, 10 years old but ancient. Children of the Depression aged differently, their childhood compressed into a desperate kind of wisdom. And in that moment, Eleanor saw that Sarah understood everything. The sickness, the starvation, the impossible equation they were all trapped inside. Eleanor made her decision. She pressed the 17 cents into Sarah's palm. Not Thomas's, not little Margaret's. Sarah's, the eldest, the watcher, the one who would have to remember. "You're in charge now," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite everything. "Take your brother and sister inside. Order the daily special. Make them share it. Make sure Margaret gets the bigger portion. She's littlest. Thomas needs the protein. Give him the meat. You eat the vegetables." But Sarah understood what her mother wasn't saying. That 17 cents was enough for one child's meal, not 3. That dividing it meant everyone stayed hungry. That this wasn't about food at all. This was a lesson. A terrible, necessary lesson about choices and consequences and the algebra of survival. Sarah's fingers closed around the coins. They felt heavy, heavier than copper and nickel should feel. Heavy with responsibility and understanding, and the weight of becoming an adult in the time it takes to count 17 cents. "What about you, Mama?" Eleanor's smile was genuine. "I ate at Mrs. Chen's. I'm fine. You take care of them." The lie hung in the air between them, both knowing it was a lie, both pretending it wasn't. This is what love looks like when everything else is stripped away. This is what mothers do when the mathematics of survival allows for only one equation. Them, not me. Always them. But then Sarah did something unexpected, something that would define the rest of her life and echo through 3 generations. She held out the coins back to her mother. "No, Mama, we'll all eat tomorrow. When Papa's money comes." Eleanor's composure cracked, just for a second. Just long enough for the photographer across the street, a man named James Warner, who was documenting Depression-era Oklahoma City for the Farm Security Administration, to capture it. That moment of a mother receiving grace from her child. That instant when the natural order inverts and children save parents instead of the other way around. But Eleanor couldn't accept it. Because tomorrow might not come, not for her. The clinic doctor's words echoed. Weeks, maybe days. Her body was shutting down, the starvation accelerating what the tumor had started. She could feel it. The way her heart skipped beats, the way her vision darkened at the edges, the way her hands trembled with more than just cold. She had to do this now, had to teach them now, before it was too late. She pressed the coins back into Sarah's hand. Harder this time. Final. Inside. Now. That's an order. Thomas started crying. Not loud, just quiet tears that left tracks on his dirty face. He understood enough to know that something terrible was happening. Something worse than hunger. Little Margaret reached for Eleanor's skirt, her tiny fingers clutching fabric like it was the only solid thing left in the world. And that's when it happened. The moment that changed everything. A voice from behind Eleanor. Rough, male, unexpected. "Ma'am?" "Excuse me, ma'am?" Eleanor turned. A man stood there, not well dressed but not destitute either. Working clothes. A face that had seen hard times but hadn't surrendered to them yet. He held his hat in his hands, twisting it nervously. I couldn't help but notice. I'd like to buy your children lunch, if you'll allow it." The words hung in the air. Impossible words. Charity, which was both salvation and humiliation. Pride and practicality went to war in Eleanor's chest. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to hold on to dignity, to protect them from the shame of accepting handouts. But then she looked at Margaret's face, at Thomas's tears, at Sarah's ancient eyes, and she said yes. The man's name was Robert Mitchell. A mechanic who still had work, barely, no children of his own. A wife who died 2 years before from influenza. He understood loss, understood that sometimes survival means accepting help even when every fiber of your being wants to refuse it. He bought them all lunch, the full dinner, not just the daily special. Pot roast and potatoes and green beans and even a slice of pie for dessert. Eleanor tried to refuse. Robert insisted. The children ate like they were storing food for winter. Slowly at first, then desperately, their bodies overriding their manners. Eleanor couldn't eat. Her stomach had shrunk too much. The smell made her nauseous. But she sat there and watched her children consume civilization one bite at a time. Watched them remember what it felt like to be full. Watched them become children again, just for a moment. Robert didn't join them. He sat at a different table, giving them privacy. But James Warner, the photographer, captured him too. A separate photo, not famous like the first one, but preserved nonetheless in the Library of Congress archives. A man sitting alone, watching a family eat, his face carrying an expression of profound sadness and profound satisfaction. After the meal, Robert pulled Eleanor aside. He spoke quietly, urgently. He'd noticed her trembling, the way she couldn't stand without holding the table. He had a sister who was a nurse, could arrange an examination, could help. Eleanor refused. Politely, but firmly. She knew what was wrong, knew there was no fixing it, knew that whatever time she had left needed to be spent preparing her children, not chasing false hope. But Robert did something else, something extraordinary. He offered Eleanor a job. His mechanic shop needed someone to handle the books. Answer the phone, nothing strenuous. 20 cents an hour, 4 hours a day. Enough to keep the boarding house. Enough to feed 3 children. Enough to survive. Eleanor Hayes, who hadn't cried in 6 months, cried then, right there on Reno Avenue. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deeper than grief. Sarah held her mother while Eleanor wept, held her, and understood that this was what survival looked like. This was what grace looked like. This was what happened when mathematics failed and humanity succeeded. The job started the next day. Eleanor worked for Robert Mitchell for 8 weeks. Every cent went to the children. Every hour she had left went to teaching them, teaching Sarah how to cook, teaching Thomas how to be brave, teaching Margaret that being little didn't mean being helpless. And every day, James Warner's photograph sat in Eleanor's pocket. Robert had given her a copy. Proof, he said, of the worst day that became the best day. Proof that even in the depression, even in the dust and desperation, human kindness still existed. But Eleanor knew something else. That photograph wasn't proof of kindness. It was proof of something more important. It was proof that choices mattered. That the decision she'd made on that street corner, the impossible mathematics of 17 cents and 3 hungry children, had led to this moment, had led to survival, had led to grace. By May, Eleanor could barely walk. The tumor winning, her body surrendering. But her children were safe. Robert Mitchell had promised to keep them together, to make sure they didn't go to the county home, to give them a chance. And Sarah, precious Sarah, had learned the most important lesson of all. That survival isn't about food or money or luck. It's about choices. It's about sacrifice. It's about loving someone more than you love your own life. But the story doesn't end here. It doesn't end with Eleanor's death in June 1933, surrounded by her children in a boarding house room that smelled of disinfectant and desperate prayers. It doesn't end with Sarah and Thomas and Margaret growing up under Robert Mitchell's rough but loving guardianship. It ends 70 years later, with a letter, with a photograph, with a choice that echoes through time. Eleanor Hayes died on June 3, 1933. She was 31 years old. The death certificate listed malnutrition as a contributing factor, though everyone who knew her understood the truth. She hadn't died from lack of food. She died from an abundance of love, from choosing her children's survival over her own, from the slow, deliberate sacrifice that mothers make when the mathematics of survival allows for only one equation. Sarah never forgot that day on Reno Avenue. Never forgot the weight of 17 cents. Never forgot her mother's face when she pressed those coins into her palm and taught her the most important lesson anyone would ever teach her. That sometimes, love means making impossible choices and living with the consequences. Robert Mitchell kept his promise. He raised those 3 children like they were his own. Sarah, Thomas, and little Margaret grew up in the back room of a mechanic shop that smelled of oil and grace. They never went hungry again, never faced the street, never ended up in the county home where so many depression children disappeared. Sarah finished school, married a good man named Daniel Morrison in 1941, had 3 daughters, worked as a teacher for 40 years. Never talked much about the depression, never showed anyone the photograph that she kept hidden in her mother's old cookbook. Never told the full story of that March day when 17 cents meant everything and nothing at once. But she wrote it down. In 1987, when she was 64 years old and facing her own mortality, Sarah Hayes Morrison wrote the whole story in a letter. Every detail, every emotion, every impossible choice. She sealed it inside the cookbook with the photograph and left instructions in her will. Do not open until I'm gone. Sarah died in 2003. Her granddaughter Emily inherited the cookbook. Didn't open it for 3 years. Didn't read the letter until 2006 when she was cleaning out her grandmother's house and found the cookbook stuffed in a box of old kitchen things. The photograph fell out first, that image of Eleanor Hayes counting coins while 3 children watched with hollow eyes. Emily had never seen it before, didn't know it existed. Certainly didn't know that her grandmother was one of those children. The girl staring at the camera with ancient eyes. Then she read the letter. All 12 pages of it. Sarah's handwriting shaky but determined. The whole story from beginning to end. The tumor. The starvation. The 17 cents. Robert Mitchell's unexpected kindness. Eleanor's death. The lessons learned. The choices made. The weight of surviving when someone you loved chose not to. Emily read it twice. Then she looked at the photograph again, really looked. At her grandmother's face, at the coins in Eleanor's hands, at the weight of impossible choices frozen in black and white. And she understood something that would save her life. Emily Morrison was 32 years old in 2006, divorced, struggling, working 2 jobs to support her 6-year-old daughter, Olivia. Living paycheck to paycheck in an economy that felt uncomfortably similar to her great-grandmother's depression. Different details, same desperation, different numbers, same mathematics. She'd been planning something terrible, something final, something that seemed like the only solution to problems that multiplied faster than paychecks. Her daughter would be better off without her, she'd convinced herself. Her ex-husband's parents would take Olivia, give her stability, give her a future Emily couldn't provide. It was the same equation Eleanor had faced, the same impossible mathematics, just inverted. Eleanor had starved herself to feed her children. Emily was planning to remove herself entirely. But then she read Sarah's letter. Then she saw the photograph. Then she understood what her grandmother had been trying to tell her across 73 years and 3 generations. That survival isn't about having enough. It's about making enough of what you have. That impossible choices are only impossible if you let them be. That sometimes accepting help isn't weakness, but wisdom. That your children need you more than they need comfort. That love means staying, not leaving. That grace exists even in the mathematics of desperation. Emily Morrison didn't go through with her plan. Instead, she did what Eleanor did. She made an impossible choice. She accepted help. She let her guard down. She admitted she was drowning and let people throw her a rope. She joined a support group, found a therapist, applied for assistance programs she'd been too proud to consider, started rebuilding. Slowly, painfully, the way Eleanor's children rebuilt after losing everything. And every morning, Emily looked at that photograph. Her great-grandmother Eleanor, her grandmother Sarah, frozen in their moment of impossible grace. She kept it on her refrigerator, a reminder, a promise, a lesson taught in 17 cents and 3 hungry faces. But here's the thing about that photograph. The thing that makes it more than just a Depression-era snapshot, the thing that turns it from historical document into something sacred. It's not in a museum. It's not in the Library of Congress with James Warner's other work. It's not famous. Most people have never seen it, will never see it. It's still in that cookbook, Sarah's cookbook. Eleanor's cookbook before that, passed down through 4 generations now. Emily's daughter Olivia has it. Keeps it in her kitchen. The photograph tucked inside, along with Sarah's letter. Olivia is 30 years old now, has her own daughter, her own struggles, her own impossible mathematics to solve. And when things get hard, when the weight of survival feels too heavy, she opens that cookbook, looks at that photograph, reads her great-great-grandmother's letter, and she remembers that survival isn't about having enough, it's about making enough matter. It's about choosing to stay even when leaving seems easier. It's about accepting grace when it's offered. It's about teaching the next generation that love sometimes looks like 17 cents and hungry children and impossible choices that turn out to be the only choice that matters. The photograph has saved 3 lives now. Sarah's when Robert Mitchell's kindness taught her that accepting help isn't weakness. Emily's when her grandmother's letter stopped her from making a permanent solution to temporary problems. And Olivia's daughter, Sophia, who will one day face her own impossible choices and find that photograph waiting for her. This is what legacy looks like. Not monuments or museums, not fame or recognition, just a photograph in a cookbook in a kitchen in Oklahoma. Just a story passed down from mothers to daughters to granddaughters. Just 17 cents that somehow multiplied into infinite value across infinite time. Just love, making impossible mathematics possible, one choice at a time. The story could end there, with Emily saved, with the photograph passed down, with lessons learned and lives rebuilt, and the mathematics of survival finally making sense. But there's one more piece. One more ripple in the pond that Eleanor Hayes created when she counted those 17 cents on Reno Avenue in 1933. In 2018, Olivia Morrison was going through her mother Emily's things after her death. Cancer, not starvation, but loss is loss regardless of the details. She found the cookbook, found the photograph, found Sarah's letter now worn at the creases from being read so many times. And she found something else. Another letter. This one from Emily. Written in 2016, 2 years before she died. Addressed to whoever came next. To whoever would inherit the photograph and the story and the impossible weight of their family's legacy. Emily's letter was shorter than Sarah's. Just 3 pages. But it contained something Sarah's didn't. An address. Robert Mitchell's mechanic shop, or what remained of it. Still standing in Oklahoma City, converted to an antique store now, But the building was the same. The place where 3 depression children had grown up surrounded by the smell of oil and grace. Olivia went there, drove from her home in Tulsa to Oklahoma City, found the building, walked inside not knowing what she was looking for, not knowing what she'd find. The owner was an elderly man named James Mitchell, Robert's grandson. He'd inherited the building, turned it into an antique store, spent his days surrounded by other people's histories, other people's photographs and letters and abandoned memories. Olivia showed him the photograph, told him the story, watched his face change as recognition dawned. James disappeared into a back room, came back carrying a box. Inside were more photographs, dozens of them. James Warner's work, inherited by Robert Mitchell, passed down to his grandson. Documentation of Depression-era Oklahoma City, families struggling, children hungry, mothers counting coins. But there was something else in that box, a journal, Robert Mitchell's journal, his own account of that day on Reno Avenue. His own impossible mathematics that led him to offer Eleanor Hayes a job, a chance, a way forward when there was no way forward. Robert had been planning to kill himself that day. March 15th, 1933. 2 years after his wife's death, bankrupt emotionally if not financially. He'd gone to Miller's Cafeteria to eat one last meal, to spend his last dollars on pot roast and pie, to say goodbye to the world through a final act of self-indulgence. Then he saw Eleanor and her children, saw the 17 cents, saw the impossible choice. And in that moment his own mathematics shifted. His own survival equation found a different solution. Helping them saved him. Giving them a future gave him one. The grace he offered Eleanor was grace he desperately needed himself. This is what the photograph really captured. Not just a mother's sacrifice, not just children's hunger, but the moment when 2 people drowning in different oceans found each other and somehow, impossibly, learned to swim. Olivia read Robert's journal right there in the antique shop. Read about how Eleanor's children became his purpose, how Sarah's determination inspired him, how Thomas's bravery taught him, how little Margaret's joy reminded him that life still contained beauty, how they saved him as much as he saved them. James Mitchell looked at Olivia and said something that completed the circle. Something that made the photograph's journey make sense. My grandfather used to say that survival isn't about having enough. It's about being enough for each other. He said Eleanor Hayes taught him that. That 17 cents can change the world if you're willing to see the value in it. Olivia understood then. Understood why her grandmother Sarah had kept the photograph hidden. Why her mother Emily had written her letter. Why the cookbook got passed down through generations like a sacred text. Because the lesson wasn't about poverty or depression or even survival. The lesson was about recognition, about seeing each other, about understanding that we're all counting coins in our own way. We're all making impossible choices. We're all standing outside metaphorical cafeterias, trying to figure out how to feed what's hungry inside us. And sometimes survival means asking for help. Sometimes it means offering help. Sometimes it means accepting grace when it's offered and offering grace when you can. Always, it means choosing to stay, choosing to count forward instead of counting down, choosing to see value in 17 cents and 3 hungry children and impossible mathematics that somehow adds up to love. Olivia left the antique shop that day with copies of Robert's journal and James Warner's other photographs. She went home to her daughter Sophia, told her the whole story. Great-great-grandmother Eleanor, great-grandmother Sarah, grandmother Emily, the 17 cents that echoed through 5 generations and 90 years. And then she did something Eleanor would have understood, something Sarah would have approved of, something Emily would have celebrated. She started a foundation, small at first, just helping families in crisis, single mothers counting coins outside cafeterias, children with hollow eyes, people drowning in impossible mathematics, She called it 17 cents. Because sometimes the smallest amount means everything. Because survival isn't about having enough, but making enough matter. Because grace multiplies in ways that mathematics can't measure. The photograph still sits in the cookbook, still gets passed down. Olivia's daughter Sophia, now 15, understands its weight. Understands that someday she'll face her own impossible choices. Her own 17 cents. Her own moment of having to decide what survival means. But she won't face it alone. She'll have Eleanor's courage, Sarah's wisdom, Emily's determination, Olivia's grace, 5 generations of women who learned that love isn't about having enough. It's about being enough for each other. The photograph isn't famous. It will never hang in museums. Most people will never see Eleanor Hayes' face, or her children's hollow eyes, or those 17 cents that somehow contained infinity. But for one family, across 5 generations, it's the most important photograph in the world. It's proof that impossible choices are only impossible if you face them alone. It's evidence that grace exists even in the mathematics of desperation. It's a reminder that 17 cents in the right hands, with the right heart, with the right courage, can change everything. Eleanor Hayes died believing she'd failed, that she hadn't done enough, that 17 cents couldn't save anyone. She was wrong. She saved her children. She saved Robert Mitchell. She saved her granddaughter Emily. She saved her great-great-granddaughter Sophia. She saved every person who learned her story and understood that survival isn't about the amount you have, but the love you give. She saved them all with 17 cents and an impossible choice, and a mother's fierce determination to make mathematics bend to love instead of the other way around. That's the lesson. That's the legacy. That's what the photograph really captures. Not poverty, not hunger, not depression-era desperation. But the exact moment when love proved to be the only mathematics that really matters. And somewhere, in a kitchen in Oklahoma, the photograph waits in its cookbook, ready for the next generation, ready for the next impossible choice, ready to remind whoever needs it that 17 cents, in the right hands, is enough to change the world. One choice at a time, one generation at a time, one act of grace at a time, forever counting forward. This is a dramatized, fictional account inspired by real hardships of the Great Depression in the United States. If Eleanor's 17 cents taught us anything, it's that love can bend the cold math of survival, and that accepting or offering help can be the bravest choice of all. In the end, the smallest act of grace can reroute an entire family's future. Before you go, what would you have done in Eleanor's place? When has someone's quiet kindness changed the course of your life? Which part of Sarah's decision stays with you tonight? And why? If you watched to the end, comment the reflective word, "Enough," so I know you were here. Tell me the city you're watching from. And if you feel comfortable, share a family story from earlier generations, something that deserves to be remembered on this channel. Thank you for keeping histories like these alive. If the message resonated, consider subscribing, liking, turning on notifications, and sharing this video. And don't miss what comes next. Click the end card to watch the next story.